Welcome to the Cosmic Dispatch, a show about bodies, celestial and earthbound, time, experience, and the relationship between all of them. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well on this June 11th, 2023. We have another big week of astrology on tap, but it's sneaky in its bigness, save for one transit that's pretty freaking obvious. But other than that, there's some stealthiness alongside some pretty typical Gemini briskness. In the second half of the show, I have Shea in the Catskills, author of the new book Tarot as Questions, joining me. And we're staying with this theme of question asking during Gemini season and really taking some time to understand the question as an art form, a tool, and a technology, and maybe even a sacred offering to spirit, ancestors, nature, or God, as in if you craft an amazing question, it's like a gift to whoever or whatever you're asking from. I mean, imagine if we took the understanding of the question into our relationships. Um, if we crafted something really beautiful, thoughtful, and profound, could we open someone's heart? Could we open someone's mind? Could we open someone's wallet? um, yeah. So it's something to think about. I think Shay will have some useful information for us. But before we get to that, and this week's astro weather, which is really interesting. Just want to say thanks to everyone who supports this show and gives us such great feedback. It really helps us guide the work that we do and grow it. So please continue to do that. Share your experiences, your musings, your questions, and give us show and guest recommendations by emailing us at thecosmicdispatch@gmail.com. And you can stay up to date with all of our content on Instagram. And please, please subscribe to the Cosmic Dispatch on YouTube if you're a visual person or if you like to follow along with a transcript. All right. Yeah. So there's housekeeping and time to dive right into the happenings of this week. So to start today, June 11th, this is a pretty big freaking day. The first big event of today involves Pluto and Mercury. After just a few months in Aquarius, Pluto is sliding back into Capricorn, and Pluto is retrograde right now, and it's returning to the scene of all the crimes. I know there were a lot that went down over the past couple of years and quite possibly the past decade. In general, I think we're going to notice a backing off on all the technology and social unrest and reorganization stories of the past few months, and a return to stories about governmental and economic infrastructure, the integrity of buildings and transportation systems, and the ongoing scrutiny of power. Who has it, who doesn't, who's losing it, who's gaining it. And this is different from the way Pluto in Aquarius is trying to reorganize social stratification. In Capricorn, Pluto isn't trying to reorganize anything so much as it's trying to obliterate what is weak or dysfunctional. And it does this by polarizing things. Pluto is not subtle. It wants to get to the bottom of something and then kill it. It's paving the way for the work it wants to do in Aquarius. So, as it slips back into the last degrees of Capricorn, um, Mercury in the very last degrees of Taurus, and this happened very early in the morning, it made a trine to Pluto, and then it entered Gemini a few minutes later. And this is a fast transit. but it's deep. It's sort of like doing a quick bit of surgery. But on this day, you can go quite deep with whatever you're working on, whether it's an investigation, a powerful move of some sort. I'm thinking this is like a chess move. A keen bit of strategy could cause a dramatic shift. So, this could be a revealing conversation or a bit of secret info that changes the game. And then it's done. And then Mercury can go on its merry way into its home sign of Gemini, getting back to being easy and breezy. Um, this also marks a dramatic end to a Mercury story. Mercury was in Taurus for an extended amount of time due to retrogrades. So, whatever your Mercury retrograde story was, it's now officially over. And you get to move and you get to think and you get to talk really quickly. Um, Things really pick up. And it's moving so fast right now that it only stays in Gemini for about 2 weeks before it moves on to Cancer. So use these next 2 weeks to juggle multiple things if you have to, or cast a wide net because mobility will be greatly enhanced, coordination will be greatly enhanced, um, mental and physical agility. I mean, you'll be able to like go and do an obstacle course or a parkour course really easily. And you can like take me up on that if you want to. And as if that isn't enough, on the same day, the 11th, today, Venus in Leo squares Jupiter in Taurus. Now, this is the first of 3 squares that Venus and Jupiter are going to make this summer. There'll be another one in August, and the final one is in September. And for those of you who follow astrology content, you may have already heard rumors of a very sexy Venus retrograde summer, and this is one of the reasons. So pay attention to what happens this week because this could be the beginning of your Venus square Jupiter story. And as usual, this can play out in a variety of ways and at different intensities depending on your natal chart and what's going on in your life. But when Venus and Jupiter get together, we're looking at sweetness, abundance, and benefits. And with the square, we're looking at a very active time with these things, active desire, active optimism, active celebration. Sounds good, right? I'll totally take that. And it really can be. Venus and Jupiter together are just gorgeous, sublime. But also, in a square aspect, we're looking at how these energies can get in each other's way and be counterproductive. And we're also dealing with retrogrades in the future meetups between these two. And those are more about the dark side of the planets. But as far as this week is concerned, with both planets direct, we're feeling Venus in Leo's love of celebration, instinct for pageantry, and desire to show itself. And it's bumping up against Jupiter in Taurus's body positivity, love of nature, art, and beauty, and buoyant optimism. And when they rub up against each other, it produces some friction. And some friction can be good and sexy and make things happen. This can be a very good time. And there might be a price. And so, um, as we all know, too much of a good thing or too much of a good time ceases to be a good time or a good thing, or it can be. So, whatever you're super excited about right now, enjoy. Go ahead. Just know that there are some rough landings with this one after the good time is over, or the amazingness you might be expecting might not live up to the hype. And that brings us to later in the week on June 15th, when Mercury squares Saturn. Now, Mercury is having conversations with the big guns of the zodiac. So, first Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, and then Saturn, the patriarch himself and Lord of Time. Now, Mercury is arguably one of the most important planets in the zodiac. Like nothing gets relayed, nothing gets conveyed, nothing moves without Mercury. And yet it's considered kind of a lightweight. But it has to be because it needs to move. It needs to be quick. It needs to do that obstacle course. And in Gemini, Mercury is going to want to tell some jokes and change the subject, and Saturn just is not in the mood. So, toward the end of the week, I see Mercury being a bit frustrated. Um, for a couple of days, it can't talk and think and process as fast as it wants to, and it might feel encumbered by the past or heavier emotions or limitations. And those are all symbolized by Saturn and Pisces. And I see Saturn and Pisces being very annoyed with Mercury buzzing about. And during the days that surround the 15th, I would try actually to tackle some weightier, heavier subjects. Like go ahead and have the harder conversations because in those circumstances, Mercury might make it easier. And what makes this even more frustrating is that by the time or by this time when Mercury and Saturn are making their square, Saturn is pretty much still. It's pretty much still right now. And that's because it's preparing for its station retrograde on the 17th. So we can see the summer retrogrades coming down the pipe like one at a time. And when Saturn pauses in preparation for its seeming backwards motion, remember the retrograde is an optical illusion, but symbolically, when it pauses, it's kind of marinating and soaking up all of the juices that make Saturn Saturn. Um, it's anchoring deeper into what it is. So we're looking at intensified restriction, slowness, resolve, and adherence to rules and traditions. And by the time it gets moving retrograde in its retrograde motion, it kind of loosens up, but it can also be very rigid. Its actions are uncoordinated. And that's what happens, during a retrograde. It's not always necessarily that the planet expresses the opposite of, what it usually expresses, or that it's weaker. You might hear a lot of these things if you follow astrology content. I don't find that's the case. I find it's more that it's just uncoordinated and kind of jerky. If you imagine, if any of you have ever taken the time to try to learn how to drive stick shift, you kind of have, these fits and starts. Sometimes it's smooth, and then sometimes there's a hiccup. That's kind of what's happening, especially when these slower planets go retrograde. But it's also true that during its retrograde, all of those Saturnian qualities get internalized and they're up for review. So you can look at the house in your natal chart where Saturn is transiting and get a good idea about what kinds of things you may be trying to restructure, as in take apart and put back together, but differently. And Saturn ends its retrograde in November. So there's a whole Saturn retrograde story that we will be gearing up for as well. And we'll be talking a lot more about this over the next several months. And there's your week. It's a real mixed bag of powerful energies, and it's going to hit everyone a little differently. And I'd say the fixed signs, which would be Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo, are going to get more of the Jupiter Venus square vibes. And of course, the mutable signs are going to feel more of the Mercury Saturn situation. So, yeah, interesting week ahead. We need to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Shea in the Catskills.